talking dreams so big that they'll haunt you, or they'll calm you. That's how you know if you gotta go and get it, get to win and not conquer. I had to go out and get it without a sponsor. Kept it real, never crooked, yeah, that's honor. Now I can go out and get it how I want to. Hashtag blessed, I choose.
What is up, YouTube? What is up, Rumble? What is up, Twitter, Glitch, or Twitter, Twitch, and Getter? Good morning. Thank you guys for joining the Ryan Matta Show today. If you guys could do us a huge solid on your way into the show, if you guys could just smash that like button. We got a great show. We got a great guest that's going to be joining us. His name is Brian D. Mint. If you guys could swing over to Twitter, this is his user. I got links to everything down below. He's also a partner over at the Orange Pill app as well. If you guys are not using the Orange Pill app and you guys are into the Bitcoin community, this app is absolutely amazing. We're going to get into that as well. And if you guys are new to Bitcoin, you guys are looking to, where do you start? What is a great book to read? I've consumed probably 5 Bitcoin books in the last 2 weeks. And I can honestly say that hands down, this is the absolute best for a beginner. If you guys know absolutely nothing about Bitcoin, you want to understand how it works, swing over to Audible. You can get an audiobook as well, or you can just go right over to Amazon and download it as well, or you can just purchase a hardback or a hard copy as well. So I'm not going to overtalk it too much. I'm going to bring Brian in the show. Brian, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate you having me, brother. That's high praise. And, now I'm kind of nervous because you set a high bar there.
Man, no, you set the bar, man. That book was absolutely phenomenal. And like I was telling him earlier before the show, I've been in the game for a long time. I've heard a lot. I've learned a lot about Bitcoin, but I can always learn more. And even parts of the book that I felt like I already knew, the way that you broke it down, the analogies you used, how you describe things, it was so consumable that I enjoyed. I didn't skip a page, I didn't skip a chapter. I'm still listening to it. I was listening to it when I went to bed last night. So you did a phenomenal job there, man.
Did the sultry voice help you fall asleep? Is that
it sure
it
did,
wasn't
man.
my voice.
That wasn't you?
No, that wasn't me. And now that's probably the number one negative feedback I've gotten on the audiobook is because the guy actually kind of sounds like me. He's just way more professional. But yeah, people have consistently said, "Oh, I don't like listening to audiobooks where the author doesn't read it." So my next book that's coming out, Parallel, is actually dropping in about 16 days, and I will be doing the audiobook for that. So yeah, and my perspective on audiobooks has changed quite a bit. I've listened to a few where they don't kind of button it up quite so much. And they do, it's almost podcast form, more like this, where the author will stop and he's like, "Oh yeah, when I wrote that sentence, I was thinking about this." And so I'm like, I kind of like that style. So I think that's going to be a little bit more the vibe for the next book.
I dig that, man. I think that's actually a solid strategy. I don't know if I've ever heard an audiobook like that. That would be really interesting. And it's going to be one of yours, so it's even better. So tell me a little bit about Parallel. What is the difference between Parallel and your previous book?
Well, yeah. So I believe that, kind of like, you said that Bitcoin evangelism is the case for Bitcoin. So like for somebody that is a no coiner and they read the book, I believe they'll finish that book being a Bitcoin maximalist, or being somebody that is willing at the point where they're like willing to go out and buy Bitcoin. Or if there's somebody that's been in Bitcoin, they now feel equipped to like answer questions. That's the evangelism side of it. Like, so in Christianity, there's one thing if you're a believer, but then there's another thing if you're able to articulate the message of the gospel to go out and share it with others, right? Like, so that's the idea, is it equips Bitcoiners to be able to go and orange pill other people. So if you've been in Bitcoin for 5 years, hopefully that book equips you with a few, little sayings, little easier ways to put things so that your no coiner friends will understand Bitcoin. That's the point of Bitcoin evangelism. Where Parallel, that's a book that makes the case for the parallel Bitcoin economy, for a parallel system. So I don't know if you've seen any of the data, but if you go to Google Trends and you look up parallel economy, there's basically no activity until 2020. But then once 2020 hits, all of a sudden you're starting to see it go off the charts for people looking up parallel system, parallel economy. And that's crazy, because I'm fascinated by a parallel system, like opting out of fiat medicine and fiat health and fiat, all the scammy systems that we have in our society right now. I'm interested in opting out of those. I've never once Googled parallel economy, and yet so many people have that those Google trends are going off the charts. So there's a will for people that want a different system. The reason why that's never existed in history is because we didn't have an appropriate money that could allow the
Mhm.
parallel system to work. We always had to rely on fiat currencies or something like gold. So gold was decentralized in a sense, but the coinage of it, it wasn't very movable. Even silver, like it had the inefficiencies of gold and silver,
Mhm.
are what made it so a parallel system could never really work to the maximum degree. And parallel systems are hard to develop because I live in Riverside, California. There might only be a handful of people that want to accept the form of money I want to use near
Mhm.
me. And so if I'm looking for people that accept gold and silver and there's only 5 people near me, that doesn't
Mhm.
fulfill all of my needs for goods and services. But with Bitcoin, you can interact with people internationally. So gold and silver
Mhm.
had a physical limitation, where Bitcoin allows you, even if you only have 5 people in your local economy, you can find somebody that's 500 miles away that will sell you meat, and they'll take Bitcoin for it and then they'll ship it to you. So it
Mhm.
broadens your economy. So instead of having 5 local people, you have 500 international people. So it's the case for the parallel system. And my background was in human behavioral science. So I studied. I wanted to I wanted to go and be a detective at one point.
No
Actually,
shit.
an FBI special agent. And so I studied propaganda. And so I would say that a good chapter and a half of the book is devoted to understanding the insidious nature of propaganda, things that about propaganda that I think
Oh,
most people, even kind of the skeptical person, doesn't quite understand how the establishment is asserting themselves through the means of propaganda.
man, I feel like you were in my live stream last night. You're literally speaking my language. I was literally just talking about just seeing if I could fully debank myself and
Mm,
go 100% to living off a Bitcoin standard. Like right now, I keep 3 months of bills and fiat in reserves just in case, worst case scenario, something
mm.
happens. Everything else goes right into Bitcoin, right? But can I get off that? Is it possible right now? Is there like a Bitcoin debit card or a way to fully, as an American, debank myself?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few Bitcoin options, like as far as there's companies that'll allow you to buy gift cards and things like that. To You're still kind of interacting with the fiat system. That's part of what we're building with Orange Pill app. The thing that we just launched last month is our merchant section. So, and it's brand new. So we're starting to populate that portion of the app. We have 10,000 individual users in the app, so 10,000 actual Bitcoiners, but we
Mhm.
only have a few dozen merchants because we just launched it, but we're onboarding those every single day right now. What that allows you to do is open the app and find Bitcoin merchants in your neighborhood, or whatever Bitcoin merchants are closest to you, so that you can go down and grab a taco from from the taco shop that accepts Bitcoin, or you can hit up the local plumber that will accept Bitcoin to fix your pipes or whatever it
Yeah.
happens to be. And so that's what we're trying to build. And so for most people, we're not quite there yet. BTC Sessions, I don't know if you know Ben from BTC Sessions. He's basically lives off of a Bitcoin standard right now, but that guy is, he's a professional in the space. He's fully in it. And so, yes, some people I think can make that work. But it takes like a special set of skills to enable that right now. That's what we're trying to build with Orange Pill app is a practical way for people to live their life that way. And there's things like BTC Maps out there right now where you can find some local Bitcoin companies, and you can go, there's websites that will show you like, hey, if I want to buy underwear, there's companies like Panties for Bitcoin, so you can buy Bitcoin underwear if you want. So some of those needs are
That's
filling
rad.
in, but unfortunately, everything you need in the circular economy or in the parallel economy is not quite there yet. And that's why we're making the case for it in the book, is hopefully to get more people off the sidelines. I mean, I go to Bitcoin conferences a few times a year, and you'd be surprised how few people at a Bitcoin conference. So you're thinking that these are the Bitcoiners of Bitcoiners. How few of those people actually want to spend their Bitcoin? And I understand that mindset. I understand because we have this hodl culture. And I'd be really interested to get your perspective on it. Is like hodl versus spend culture in Bitcoin. It's like, what's the ethos there? Because it is the best form of saving. So Bitcoiners feel like they're wasting their money. Like, oh, I'll just spend my fiat. Like I want to get rid of my fiat. But it's one of those things. It's almost like an investment in the parallel
Mhm.
economy by spending your Bitcoin. And you can always spend and replace as well. And I think that's what a
Mhm.
lot of Bitcoiners are starting to do. They spend $100 in Bitcoin and then go buy $100 of Bitcoin, or they buy $100 of Bitcoin and then go spend it. So you're not dealing with any of the volatility and stuff like that. But I mean, what are your thoughts? Like, is that difficult for you? Sorry, this isn't my interview, but I
Let's
actually
do it,
just
man.
people in the space. I'm fascinated by their thought on it. Is it hard for you to spend your Bitcoin, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I want to touch on one thing because you hit on the Orange Pill app. I actually did a step-by-step tutorial on everything about this app. So if you guys get time, swing over, and if you just go in my video tab, not my lives or the other channel, just go right to the video tab and watch this Orange Pill video. It's about 12 minutes and it'll walk you through step by step. And then you can also get 10,000 free sats. I know that's going to change because the price of Bitcoin keeps going up, but right now you sign up, you get $10,000 in free Satoshi. So it's a paid app, right? And that's great. So there's no riff-raff. There's not 100,000 Asian girls that are going to message you and try to convince you that they want to marry you, but you got to pay them $200 in Bitcoin first, right? It's a great place to be and a great place to meet a lot of Bitcoiners. So swing over there and check that app out. And
just to be clear, it was 10,000 sats. You said that, but then you said, I think, $10,000 in sats. So just for the audience, it's 10,000 sats, which is about $6. Yep. I was wondering why the signups were just blowing up right now. No, so I'm just, so yeah, 10,000 sats. It's a good deal. So yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate
and the link's
that,
down there in the description too, if you guys need it. And you'll get 10,000 free. And then if you guys use my link, I'll get 10,000 free. So it's a win-win. Now, as far as spending Satoshi or spending Bitcoin, I'm moving on to that like Satoshi mindset, right? Where I'm kind of starting to value everything in Satoshis versus dollars, which makes me spend even less money. I think that anytime you look at people that become more wealthy, what do? They spend more money, right? So as you start saving in Bitcoin, I think there will be a period where, people are hodling Bitcoin to try to, preserve that wealth and just accumulate. But there will become a point where they're like, wow, I'm really in a good position. And I think that's when you really see the mass spending. As far as right now, the hardest part is getting in, right? Like where I have to convert. So if I'm losing money to convert into Bitcoin just to go spend, or even the worst would be losing money converting fiat to Bitcoin, whether you go through an exchange or any centralized party where you're going to take that haircut to transition. And then say price is volatile, and then you have to go out, and maybe you go out and Bitcoin's a little bit lower than when you came in because you couldn't hodl for a long enough time. And then you take a little bit of a haircut there, and then you take a haircut going back out of it. So that's the only time where I think that once we make that process where you can get in and out of Bitcoin for a few cents and it doesn't really matter. Of course, if I could swap $100, pay in Bitcoin, and it would only cost me an extra 10 cents or less than Visa, your 30 cents at PayPal or whatever it was, all day I would do it. I wouldn't think twice about it. I'd much rather build that parallel economy. And I think Jeff Booth says it best, right? It doesn't matter if you are in the fiat system, it doesn't matter what you do in it, it strengthens that system. So until you fully withdraw from it, anything that you are doing in it, you are supporting it. And unless we all choose to withdraw from it, or not even all, I think he says like 20% of us have to completely withdraw from that economy. And then what it does is it forces the bad market actors, the feds, to take advantage of the remaining 80% more. So if 20% of us come out, then they're basically stealing from only 80% of the population size. And then that'll charge more people out, and it'll eventually just rapidly implode upon itself. But I would love to hear what your thoughts are on that as well.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's the 80-20 rule as well, right? So if that 20% that comes out is the most productive, or some of the most productive 20% of your economy, you're potentially taking out really the entire economy, right? At least the strength of it. And so that's a really important point. The last chapter of the book is called Every Day is Election Day. And so the premise of that chapter, and it's kind of the commission for everybody at the end of the book, and it gives some kind of practical, 12 practical steps for kind of implementing the parallel system. Because it's not just as simple as like spending Bitcoin. That's a huge part of it. That's like the big part of it. But there's some other things we can do. And it's like you said, it's that the premise is you might not think your vote matters, right? We're in an election year. You might think that elections are rigged, or you just might think that you're one of 150 million votes. And so your vote ultimately really doesn't, one out of 150 million, how important is that? Well, guess what? What vote does matter is everything you do, and not just in terms of purchases, like everything you click on, every video you watch and like, every tweet you share, every interaction you do, everything you do is an economic decision. We're in such a tied in, connected society and economy where everything you do, if you decide to eat in or eat out, that's an economic decision. If you decide to go to the movie or stay in, that's an economic decision. If you're going to read a book tonight or watch Netflix, an economic decision. And so not to make people neurotic, but everything we do has a consequence, either in the Bitcoin economy or in the fiat economy, or at least opting out of the control mechanisms of the fiat economy. And so I obviously sound a little bit sick right now, but one of the big commissions I give is just like the difference between you see a high correlation of health consciousness to Bitcoiners. It's like, why do so many Bitcoiners talk about working out and low time preference types of endeavors where it's like dieting and fasting and eating clean and all these things? Like, why is there such a high correlation? It's because once we start to think, wow, my money has saving power into the future, I better make sure that I'm not just alive in the future, but that I have quality of life, because my money's gonna, outlive me. And so how do I kind of catch up to that a little bit? And so every time we skip a doctor's visit, like an unnecessary doctor visit, because, I remember when I was a kid, if you had a scratchy throat, straight to the doctor. Well, like, what does the doctor do? They don't do anything for you. You pay your copay and you get a prescription maybe, and a prescription that doesn't do anything because they give you an antibiotic for a virus, which antibiotics don't work on a virus. And all these things, all these fiat things that we do, we don't think of that as Bitcoin at all. That absolutely, by avoiding those things, is unwinding the fiat controls that we have. And then so when you do buy Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, and then maybe even spend Bitcoin, your vote is worth twice as much. And so let me give you the one last example here is, imagine there's an election and 51 million votes go for, the Democrat, 49 million votes go for the Republican. The Democrat wins 51% of the vote. He then, after the election, gets 100% of the power, right? Like, it's an all or nothing thing. But in an economic thing, like, let's take this to Bud Light. Imagine last year, Bud Light, before their Dylan Mulvaney thing, they're getting $100 million in sales. Well, if the next year they're only getting $51 million, they're only getting 51 million votes of dollars for their product, they're losing out on $49 million worth of votes, right? Economic votes actually have a lot more impact. It's not a mutually exclusive zero-sum game like it is with elections. And so your economic votes always carry power. Every time you vote with a dollar, it absolutely has an impact. The magnitude of the impact can vary, but it's not like an election. Like, I think that's why people get frustrated with elections. Like, I voted for the guy who lost, and so yeah, my vote actually kind of didn't count. Like, it's not being reflected in the election results now. But when you make that vote with your dollar or your time or your attention, it always counts.
Wow, that's very true, man. That's really deep. I guess I never thought about it like that. And I think, how long do you think it's going to be before more people, like, when did you get into Bitcoin? I guess I should have started from the beginning, in the very beginning, but tell me about when did you get into Bitcoin?
So this month is actually my 10-year anniversary. I got into it in April of 2014. So yeah, I started studying it in 2013, but like more as a skeptic. I was really trying to kind of disprove it. I had a couple of friends who were into it. I remember trying to just learn about it because I said all the same things that everybody says. It's a pyramid scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme. Did I really know what those things were? Like, I didn't really know what a Ponzi scheme was, but I just knew that it was like something. It was like basically like a pyramid scheme or a multi-level marketing or something. Yeah, right. And it turned out to be true. And it's a cult. And I just think it's funny because anytime somebody says it's a cult, then I just always post my book link in that, like, it's not a cult, and it's like Bitcoin evangelism. It's like, that's kind of a cult. But anyways, that very much a skeptic. And that's actually that's why I really tie in the religious component to the book. You don't have to be a religious person to read my book. I don't think I like overly do it, but I think that was, as a Christian, I started out as an atheist, kind of challenged those beliefs, and then, became a Christian out of a skeptic mindset. Same thing with Bitcoin. It's very skeptical of it. And then I believe if something's true, the more you ask questions about it, the more you peel back the truth, and then it becomes more profound. I think the people that start skeptical, and this is why I think Bitcoiners have such high conviction, is because we're skeptical people by nature. Most of us said no to Bitcoin. We all have a story about like, oh, I heard about Bitcoin in this year, and then I didn't buy it until like 2 years later or 3 years later. And then, it's because we have a skeptical mindset. But the highest conviction people are the ones who said no and then had to be proved that their original belief was wrong. And one, you feel like kind of dumb that you took the wrong belief, but then you feel, well, I did challenge this belief and it stood up to my challenge and then won. So like, this is the Mac Daddy. This is the way to go. And so we have higher conviction than perhaps the average person.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I forget who I was interviewing. I think it's Eric V. Stacks who said, he's like, that's what makes the Bitcoiners, because if you're not skeptical in the beginning, you're probably a shitcoiner, right? Because you had the opportunity to buy Bitcoin. It's almost always the first coin that everybody hears about. And then somebody probably said, oh, Bitcoin's a good investment. And you didn't question it. You're like, okay, cool. You bought it, right? And then when somebody said, hey, Solana, or hey, Ethereum, your dumbass was like, oh, hey, yeah, okay, right? There was no skepticism there. And so you go right from being a potential Bitcoiner just right to being a shitcoiner. And then eventually you learn, like most of us did the hard way, that there is no second best, right? And then you come back to Bitcoin. And you touch on Bud Light there too. I wanted to dive into that. So I've been saying, right, and I do a show on LFA TV at 2 p.m. for if anybody's interested. It's a political show. And I've just got really to know the MAGA base, as they call it, a lot of these conservatives out there. And it's pretty strange how their values align directly with the Bitcoin. Like you said, healthy living, right? Eating good, taking care of your finances, paying, becoming a productive member of society, running businesses, right? Trying to save money and not pay as many taxes as humanly possible. And knowing that I was on LFA TV, and like I tell everybody this story, so I'm going to tell it to you, is when I first started there, my second show, I started to try to orange pill people a little bit, right? And I started to teach them about the 5 principles of money. I wasn't going right into Bitcoin, but I was trying to teach them and understand like what the 5 key characteristics are, like Breedlove teaches. And and it was one of my worst shows in LFA. So it's like, okay, maybe the conservative base isn't ready to get orange pill. This was when Bitcoin was at like 20,000, right? So I was really trying to get them in at a really good price point, but they just weren't having it. So then a couple weeks went by and I kind of got to feel out the layout of my show, and my shows would always, from the time they started to the time they end, it's almost always projected upwards as far as viewer counts. By the end of the show, it's like, it's something about Rumble, the way it is. So I waited till the last 20 minutes of a show just to see, right? And then my view count kind of started going down. This is about 2 weeks into it. That's about a year and a half ago, or a little over a year ago. And now I can pretty much rant about Bitcoin from the time my show starts until, not really the whole show, but, and it's amazing seeing how many people have went from being skeptics or non-believers or gold buyers to like, wow, this is more than I thought it was. My belief system is changing. I think that the MAGA and conservative base of probably 95 million people, and then you mix in that, I was just doing the research this morning, there's 70 million Gen Zs in our country. And I don't know if you've been watching these Gen Zs on TikTok and how they're feeling about the economy, and they're just getting crushed and they don't have the opportunities. And the mainstream media is like, dogging on Gen Z, and these people are getting pissed. Like, listen, we don't have the opportunity that you had when you were, like your parents or your grandparents had. Like their ability to access capital and money and produce wealth and generate wealth and store wealth in a currency that wasn't crushing them. I mean, at 20 years old, people were able to basically go buy a house with a minimum wage job, right? Like a bricklayer or a labor, or, even my parents, my mom was like flipping burgers and like working at like the local ski lodge, and like they had enough to have a car payment and get a house. And now this generation is getting crushed. Where I'm going with this is how long or how fast do you think it could happen if like the conservative movement wakes up and goes, we're going to Bud Light the Fed? Do you think that that's a possibility? Like enough people waking up and going, we're done. Like there's no hope in that system. It is fiat slavery. It's designed to keep you enslaved. It's designed to extort your wealth from people who produce nothing but press a button on a keyboard, and they're stealing, 2% of your wealth. And now they're trying to convince you that like 2% inflation is a good thing. And it's really like they are stealing 2% of the wealth of the entire country, more so the world, if everybody's accepting dollars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How long do you think it would take for people to really wake up and go, we're done? We're withdrawing from a corrupt economy?
I mean, we're seeing that slowly and then suddenly. I mean, I think I show the chart in my book, but anybody that goes on Google and just like types in adoption cycle, you'll see that there's a chart. It's kind of a bell curve that shows, kind of the lunatic fringe, the really early adopters, and then they show the early majority, the late majority, and then like the really late adopters. I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that cycle play out. If you go back, I remember,
it's like a bell curve.
It's like a bell curve. Yeah. And I think that's what it is. I think it starts with lunatic fringe or like early adopters and then early majority. But yeah, you might see that if you can bring it up, but,
is this the one?
Let me see here. You know what? Sorry, it's not showing me your screen.
Give me 1 second. Reason. Let me, I'll fix that. I should be able to click a button and it should show you here. Okay. 1 second.
There we go. Oh, you're upside down. There we go. All right. Yes. So yeah, I mean, exactly that. Similar. And you could, and that's exactly the chart. And you can see this with all sorts of things. So it's not just Bitcoin. This is any kind of of societal change, paradigm change, technological change, this exact bell curve happens. This is what happened with the telephone. This is what happened with the printing press, all sorts of things. And so if you go back, I'm 38 years old. When I was a kid, you'd hear about Ron Paul, and he was like the crazy libertarian that was talking about ending the Fed. He was the only one talking about it. And so if you're looking at the bell curve, that's why there's like, it's so shallow at the beginning, because you have Ron Paul and the few people that follow Ron Paul. And then you get to kind of our generation of the anti-Fed people, which is like the early majority. And so your early adopters. I think we're in the early adopter phase. That's where you could kind of put us right now. And some of these charts will show a little bit of a gap between early adopters. There's like a pause in time between early adopters and early majority. I think there's an argument to be made that COVID is what kind of kicked us into, that's what's helping bridge the gap between early adopters and then the early majority. I think that most of the MAGA base is sensing the problems with the Fed. And what's crazy is that the Fed chairman and everybody that was working at the Fed during COVID, they would say things, the quiet parts out loud, like you just said, that don't worry, like there's going to be plenty of liquidity in the market. Like, oh, everybody's on unemployment right now. Don't worry, with just a few strokes of a keypad, we can add money. That should have been alarm bells for this system is Fugazi. Like the fact that this system isn't real. And yet everybody just thought, okay, the temporary fix is here. Now, like we said, Bitcoin is making people think more long-term. And so it's helping unwind some of that Fed mentality. So I just think it's a slowly and then suddenly thing. And that's when you look at that bell curve again, it really takes a while to ramp up. But then once you hit that early majority phase, you really get to the top of that bell curve. And when you're, so when that 34%, that early majority, you go from like a moderate amount of people then to the top of the bell curve, right? Like once it's at the top of the bell curve, you have mass awareness by everybody, right? And then it's just up to people as far as whether they want to maintain the existing system. If you're at the top of the existing system, you're going to fight to keep it and that sort of thing. But you have enough public awareness. And I think that Trump kind of switching his position, softening on Bitcoin is kind of has changed a lot of the MAGA base quite a bit, because he was very anti-Bitcoin, or at least not, I don't know if you call it very anti-Bitcoin, but I like the dollar. Bitcoin's
the biggest
stupid.
dollar bull in the world.
Yeah. And why not? If I was a billionaire, I would probably like the existing system as well. But then I think Vivek Ramaswamy, as soon as he dropped out of the campaign, the presidential race, it was like the next day he's in Trump's camp and Trump's talking about Bitcoin. I think that Vivek Ramaswamy, whether people like him or not, if you're a Bitcoiner, that might be one of the most positive things for Bitcoin. If Trump does get elected and he has Vivek as either an advisor or a VP, I think that you're going to see a favorable language. That's all you want out of the president in that position. I don't think that they should mandate Bitcoin. I mean, I like El Salvador, but when the president made it you have to accept it everywhere, that was kind of like almost like an anti-Bitcoin ethos. Was that, I'm not mad at it at the end of the day, but it was like, well, do you have to force everybody to accept it? Like, that's kind of a weird thing. And so I think what you want out of a president is you want the pulpit of the president, the ability to talk about these things and help move public sentiment. If Trump's talking about Bitcoin, inevitably what that fixes and the problem of the Fed will be talked about more. So I gave a really long roundabout answer of, I don't know exactly how long it's going to take, but what I do think is going to happen is that it's going to be like last year. I didn't know that many people that talked about ending the Fed. And then all of a sudden today, we're going to wake up and all of my friends are asking about not only Bitcoin, but how do we end the Fed? How do we end this scammy system? One of the examples I used in my new book, I got it right here. Parallel. This is like the rough draft version.
Yeah, show it up there. Throw it up there again.
Oh yeah. So it's called Parallel. By the way, the pre-orders are live right now on Amazon. You can only pre-order the ebooks, but in the ebook exclusively, there's a 1 million sat seed phrase hidden in the book. So if somebody wants 1 million sats, which is about $660 worth of Bitcoin right now, if you pre-order the book and you're the first person to find that seed phrase in the book, it launches on the halving. So It's either 420, 421, 419, whenever the halving date is, that's when the book goes live. Not only will I think people, especially Bitcoiners or just freedom maximalists, like this book, but you can find 1 million sats worth of Bitcoin inside of the book. Anyways, the example I was going to use was, or the story that I share, I kind of write a parable in the book about two business partners. And we'll just say in this case, it's Ryan and Brian are these two business partners. And oh, dang, we got a pre-order.
Yeah, we ordering it right now.
There we go. All right.
Go.
I appreciate it, bro.
Thank you. I appreciate you, man. It was that simple. One click, guys. You guys get over there and order that right now.
One click pre-order.
I love those million stats.
That's the nice thing about Amazon. But anyways, okay, say we have two business partners. We have Ryan and Brian, and they started a tech company, and Brian's kind of sketchy, and Ryan's a hardworking individual. Brian's in charge of the books and the accounting and all that kind of stuff. And at the end of the year, the company was successful. We had 100 shares. And I said, you know what, Ryan, I know that I'm not going to, I shouldn't use you as this because it makes you kind of sound like you're oblivious, but there's one partner that's being taken advantage of because he's not cunning and he's not scammy. And he's just a good, hardworking guy. And if I say at the end of the year, hey, there's 100 shares of our company, we each have 50, you know what? Let's add some more shares. We really worked hard. Each share is worth $10. Well, if we double our shares, then, or if we add more shares, then we're going to have more money, right? Like it's like a stupid mindset. But I'd say, okay, Ryan, you're going to get 10 more shares, but I don't tell you that I'm actually giving myself 200 more shares, right? And if that happens every year, after about 10 years, your shares are completely diluted. You think, if you're not aware, you think I have double the amount of shares that I had before 10 years ago. I have 200 shares now, or I have 100 shares instead of 50 shares, or I have 200 shares instead of 100 shares. But then the scammy partner has 2,000 shares, right? It diluted your portion of the company. So even though you have nominally more shares, you have percentage-wise less. That's what happens every time more dollars get entered into the economy. Your $100 bill today represents a certain percentage of the economy. If they add more dollars, if they add more $100 bills to the economy, then your $100 is getting diluted. It's actual theft. The example that's the reason why I use that example in the book is because in the book, you can see clearly that one business partner is taking advantage of the other business partner, that he should go to jail for doing that. And yet that's the exact same premise that the Federal Reserve operates under. So the more that we can use kind of axiomatic language and parables and things like that to convey the points about why the Fed needs to end, the better. The big difference is people are starting to listen to the end the Fed message now, right? Before it was just like, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're kind of crazy. Well, now conspiracy theorists are like 35-0 in the last few years, right? And so people are listening to the crazy people who are the dissenters and things like that. Okay, so maybe there's something to this end the Fed thing, and that's why we're starting to see that. So yes, I think that, over the last 20 years, Ron Paul was the only one out there. Then you get some Bitcoiners that are there. I think within the next 5 years, you see a mass awakening of people with the Fed is an absolute scam. How do we opt out of this?
What do you think that catalyst is going to be? Do you have any idea of is it just more and more pain and economic, betrayal of our government? Is it more $1.2 trillion omnibus packages that were supposed to be single subject spending bills when Republicans take the House, and now we're giving $4.2 million to Pocahontas so she can pump Latinx businesses? Or is it Fetterman giving $400,000 to podcasters? Or is it Biden giving $1.2 million to streamers? Or is it Nancy Pelosi making $125 million stock trading last month?
The answer is yes. Yes to all. So funny story about Fetterman real quick. You know how he's known for being in sweats and just a complete slob. Well, with Orange Pill app, this is probably 7 months ago now. We did an initiative where we said if Saifedean joins Orange Pill app, Saifedean Ammous, the guy that wrote the Bitcoin Standard, if he joins Orange Pill app, we'll buy a copy of the Bitcoin Standard for every member of the Senate and the House in the U.S. Congress. And we kind of did it as a stunt. We're like, no way, Saifedean's going to join. And then an hour later, Saifedean said joined. He joins right away. So we're like, oh shoot, we got to buy $10,000 worth of books. And so not only did we do that, we actually took them out there. And then Dennis Porter from Satoshi Action Fund. Thank God he helped us, because we would have been totally clueless with how to go around the Capitol. So he gets like, we organized 25 Bitcoiners through Orange Pill app, like local Bitcoiners in the DC area to help us go in. I didn't know this. I mean, I'm thinking like January 6th, like you're not allowed to go in the Capitol. No, like anybody can go into the Capitol. You don't even need permission. Like you go through a metal detector and you go in. So we went in with these cartons of books and we delivered the Bitcoin Standard to every Senate office and every congressman. I mean, it took all day for 25 people to do it, and we dropped them off in every one. It was actually a pretty positive response, by the way, but we don't have to go into that. But we're walking around, and the reason why we picked that day, it was because it was during a joint session of Congress where the Senate and the House were both there because they had to vote on things. There was a bunch of bills they had to vote on.
Yeah.
And so at one point of the day, nobody's in their offices. And we're thinking like, oh, wow, like where'd everybody go? Oh, it's because they were all on the floor voting. And so we went to Fetterman's office. We're like, oh, let's just see if he's in there. He wasn't in there. And we said, okay, his staffer was there. We said, can you give this book to him? And they said, yeah, sure. And we're walking. We go outside of his office to like a little courtyard area. And I kid you not, all the other congressmen and senators are in voting. They're working. He's out at a park bench in sweats, just sitting there looking off into he's just by himself, just sitting there. I'm like, this guy was he was sitting there catatonic. It was so weird. I thought that this was like smoke and mirrors or something like that, what you see on TV.
Yeah.
Nope. He's like he was like a shell of a human sitting there in sweats in the US Capitol in the courtyard and just catatonically staring off into space. Nobody around. We could have walked up to him and said hi to him or whatever. It was so strange and surreal. Because I think so, yeah, like I said, so much of politics is smoke and mirrors. No, this guy is like an actual walking puppet. It's very, very, very weird. Sorry, I don't even know what that had to do with your question. I just wanted to talk about the Fetterman story. I think you're saying what's going to be the catalyst. I think the catalyst is, yes, all those things. The spending. I think we're coming to a head right now where the U.S. is unable to service our debt. The Federal Reserve is in a position where if they raise interest rates, our debt service goes up by hundreds of billions of dollars. They can't do that. We can't pay that. And if we do, if our debt service goes up by hundreds of billions of dollars, we need to print more money to do that. And so it just makes the snowball effect happen. If we don't print more money and we lower rates, then we don't have the money to buy all the votes that we need to buy because we're basically a socialist society with all the welfare and all the things that we do. And so they're in a rock and a hard place. They're losing their power one way or the other. I think that's kind of the beautiful part from a Bitcoiner's perspective on the Fed is that central banks always die. They always will. The sad part is people get dragged down with the ship. And that's why I think Bitcoiners are so passionate. We're trying to tell people, hey, there's lifeboats. There's lifeboats you can get into. Don't get dragged down with the ship. And so that's why we get up early and we do podcasts and we talk to people. We write books and all that kind of stuff is so that doesn't happen. But it absolutely inevitably will happen. I think we're starting to really see that speed up quite a bit, though.
You know, I want to add to that ship analogy because I use it quite often. I feel like America is the Titanic, right? We've hit the iceberg, and Congress is the people that stuck around instead of trying to find the lifeboat. Like the Bitcoiners are the ones that are like beelining to the lifeboat. Congress is in the dining room lining their pockets with the silver and gold silverware, right? Like the ship's going down and these people aren't worried about saving themselves or saving anybody else on the boat. They're worried about making themselves as rich as humanly possible at any cost, no matter if it's their personal cost, the cost of their constituents, their children, or anybody, right? And I don't know how much longer it can take. I thought it would have collapsed. I think a lot of us Bitcoiners thought that it would have never made it this long. We would have never made it to $34 trillion in debt before people were like, we're out of this system. What is it? Is it the education that how we were raised and how we've just been brainwashed to believe, the earth is this spinning ball and all these other crazy conspiracy theories that turn out to be true? And then like the money one, we were never taught about it. We were taught to don't talk about money, religion, or politics with your family. And is that why
I think that's exactly it, right? Like, isn't it funny? Like, why were we raised with that? Like, don't talk about the things that are the most important to you, right? Like, I might be wrong about my faith, but I'm definitely never going to be right about something unless I talk about it. And so how do you make sure that somebody's never right about something? You just make sure they don't talk about it. They don't edify themselves and sharpen themselves on other people. How do you make sure people are financially dumb? Don't talk about money. That's taboo. That's being pushy. That's being intolerant. and all
Right.
sorts of things. So you're right. I mean, we were raised to be, and Daniel Prince. So the new book Parallel is I have two co-authors, Knut Svanholm, who wrote Everything Divided by 21 Million.
I
He
need to
writes
read that.
it's a good book. He writes the prologue of the book, and then Daniel Prince writes a chapter. Daniel Prince is very well known for world schooling or homeschooling in the Bitcoin space. He wrote the chapter on education, fiat education. And it's exactly, he does a great breakdown. And some Bitcoiners might be aware of this, but our education system, the public education system, was built out by Rockefeller based on European models of during the Industrial Revolution. They were building good factory workers. They were building docile people that would go. I mean, it's crazy that we put kids in school for 8 hours a day. Like, that's probably not how long. My kids are homeschooled. My wife does a fantastic job. They are ahead of schedule. They do about 2 hours to 2.5 hours of school, like actual school every day. Now they read and they do all, sports and all these things on the side and stuff. But as far as like sitting down and doing book work, they do about 2 hours worth of work per day, and they're ahead of schedule. It's like, why do we need kids to go in for 8 hours a day into public school? Because that's when you clock in and clock out at work, right? And how are we taught to not ask questions? How are we, we're ingrained. These things are ingrained into us. And I mean, think about how many things as an adult you look back on and you just think, why did I do that? Why did my family do that when we were children? Like, my family wasn't in poverty. Like, we weren't like poor, dumb, and destitute or anything like that. And yet we still followed kind of the fiat maxims of the day. It's because they were indoctrinated. My parents were indoctrinated into the public school system. Their parents were kind of at the beginning of that. One of the other things I break down in the new book is just kind of, like I talked about earlier, the different propaganda, but there's just things like fiat music. There's a quote by, I think, John Lennon, the song Imagine. People love singing that song, Imagine. He said in an interview one time, he goes, it's the Communist Manifesto with a nice tune, right? Like, our parents' generation sang these songs that are espousing these ideas of collectivism and, putting the collective greater than the individual. So we were trained to be just a wheel in the cog, or a cog in the machine, as opposed to a free thinking individual. I would much rather be in a society of a bunch of strong individuals rather than a bunch of individuals trying to make one entity strong. And I think that history's shown that every time that you have a collective, it tends to fall apart because the central authority just can never sustain power. And so, yeah, I think that it's generations, it's generational warfare. And I think that it's going to take a big thing, a big cataclysmic event in order to turn things around. But the blowing up of the Federal Reserve, like, obviously I'm not talking about blowing it up. The blowing up of that system financially is going to be the catalyst for change.
Do you think people like Trump have what it takes as far as, I mean, I'm about as pro-Trump as you can get, so I'm not knocking Trump at all, but he is this huge dollar bull. And the more you start learning about the system, the more you realize that the only way to defeat it is to completely withdraw from it, because everything you do within it just strengthens that system and reinforces it. Do you think that he has the wherewithal to, like, he's all about that economy and he's going to want to make it boom and make America prosper, and really we need a reset in America and to start fresh on a new standard? Do you think that, what do you think that transition would look like? Like, say we got Trump in, Vivek as VP, he assigns Vivek to run up this transition. What do you think that would look like for America going off of the dollar standard into the Bitcoin standard? Is that possible to do in a 4-year period, or is this something that's going to take 10, 20, 30 years to do?
I think it's not going to be Trump's doing. I don't think a president or a congressman or anybody is going to force that, jam that change. I think it's just going to be a failure of the Federal Reserve, right? And the smart people. So think back, or think, I guess, to current context. Look at all the former liberal news anchors who I think are kind of seeing the writing on the wall that woke culture is kind of crumbling, right? Andrew Cuomo, or is it not Andrew Cuomo? Which is the, well, I don't know. Who is that?
Sorkin, the one.
Oh, Sorkin. Yeah. So no, I'm thinking of on Valuetainment. I don't know if you ever
Oh,
watched Patrick Bet David show. He just hired one of the Cuomo brothers. I don't know if it's Chris Cuomo or Andrew,
yeah,
the guy
Chris.
that
I
was
think it's Chris.
the
Yeah,
CNN
CNN.
anchor.
Yep,
Yeah.
Chris.
And you look at these guys, and I've seen a few of them doing this, is they were like, especially, pre-COVID and especially during COVID, they were the worst offenders of woke culture, Black Lives Matter, get a COVID lockdown and mandated vaccines.
Yep.
They were singing the party song with all of those things during COVID and pre-COVID. And now they're starting to gravitate more towards conservative things. I don't think it's because they're maybe they've had a come to Jesus moment and their values are changing, or they're seeing the problems with it. I think that might be some of them. I think they're seeing a trend in the ratings, in the interest, in the fact that conservative values, that MAGA culture, or whatever you want to call it, that is becoming more popular, and that they were going off of maybe how many tweets or views they were getting on their social media, because I think that's very it's very misleading to these people, because they would tap in, they would get 5,000 retweets, they would say something that was like pro-trans, and they'd get a bunch of activity. But when you think about it, 5,000 people on Twitter actually isn't that many people, right? When you're talking about the majority of people. And so I think what they're starting to realize is things are changing. And so my point there is that the smart people will see the shift happening ahead of time. I think Trump's smart and insightful enough to realize when the Federal Reserve ship is sinking, he will be very quick to get on the train of the Fed sucks. We need a new system. We need to build it. I don't think he's going to start that. I don't think he's going to do it before the Fed starts to fail. But as soon as the Fed does start to fail, I think Trump's smart enough to say, okay, well, I've got a plan. Trump's got his hands full, man. I mean, he has his hands full with so many things. If he gets reelected, which I think he will, the perception of Trump is that he's divisive and all these things. And so he has to overcome public sentiment issues. He's going to have all sorts of opposition in Congress. And I think Trump's biggest weakness from his first term, I mean, it's pretty clear that the apparatus, that the state apparatus, the globalists hate Trump. I mean, they've come after him. I don't think he was fully aware of how embedded the swamp was into the regulatory agencies. It seems like the advice that he was getting on a lot of things, especially during COVID, wasn't good advice. And it's because there were so many plants that were in his ear. I think he's going to be more aware of that this time. But I think guys like Vivek Ramaswamy who have worked in pharma, like he had a pharmaceutical company. I think he understands a bit more how that corruption works. I know Kennedy's running against him right now. I think Kennedy would be a decent advisor. I'm not a huge fan of Kennedy, but he's been in courtrooms for so long against regulatory agencies that I think that he would be somebody that would be a decent advisor for Trump, of knowing who is in on it and who isn't in on it. I mean, you talk about guys that, whether you like Kennedy or not, or where he stands on policies, he is also an enemy of the state. Like, he doesn't have Secret Service protection. His family's been killed by the state, all sorts of things. So he and Trump both have reasons. It doesn't mean that makes them automatically right in their positions, but it does mean that they do want to unwind the swamp. And so I think that if Trump can surround himself with guys that know the inner workings of those regulatory agencies, he will begin to unwind them. I would be happy enough with Trump spending the next 4 years just unwinding the chaos that is, and maybe shrinking some of those regulatory agencies. That would probably have a lot of unintended consequences on things like the Federal Reserve, that would help expedite their demise. But I don't think he needs to come out and say it. I don't think he needs to come out and say end the Fed. I think he can toe that line of saying, I like the dollar, but Bitcoin is a good option. And then he can have that on record that that's his position. But then once the dollar starts to go through massive inflation, he can say, look, I've been championing Bitcoin since before my second term. And, he would love to brag about that. So I think that that's probably the best tactic he could take.
So a lot of Bitcoin maxis think that everything else besides Bitcoin is a security, which means you're going to give power to an unelected government bureaucrat to regulate an industry and basically force and kill all shitcoins. My stance is that the best cure for the shitcoin virus is the shitcoin itself, is pain, right? Like, you only get wrecked 1 or 2 times before you learn. Yeah. So just letting the free market play itself out. Where do you stand on that, as far as, like, Gary Gensler is the head of the SEC, right? He facilitated the payments for the Steele dossier. He was an advisor for the Clinton campaign, right? Like, this man basically staged a coup against the sitting president and overthrew the president of the United States, or was attempting to, with the FBI and the CIA. I mean, and then he went and fired all conservatives from his office and replace those with like 100% of like anti-Trump, Trump hating liberals, like the worst of the worst. Like that agency is completely weaponized. What are your thoughts on giving them power to destroy the industry versus just letting it play out and letting people just shitcoin like we did and get wrecked and become Bitcoin maximalists?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we talked about that a lot off air, is that we both came to Bitcoin maximalism through a natural life cycle. I think that that's fine. I think that that's why I try to address it in the book. I talk about altcoins quite a bit in the book, and I try to take a sensitive approach. I
You do. You
I
do a really
hope
good
that
job at it.
somebody, if they're an altcoiner, that they can read that book and they're like, oh, okay, Brian's not like a super toxic maxi. He's talking about what a smart contract is, and he's talking about what the merits of what these things are. And I think ultimately the altcoins will act as a research and development arm for Bitcoin, and you know, the things that work on altcoins, great. Like, let them move fast and break things over there. And then when it works, we can put it on Bitcoin. That's my take. And so, yeah, even if I thought regulation was the best option, which I don't, but even if I thought regulation was the best thing for the crypto space, I would not want to give, it would be more important to not give power to Gensler and the SEC or any agency to do that. I would rather have the evil of the crypto space present than the evil of regulatory agencies. I'm like what exactly you said, without, I mean, we didn't say that exact word, but it's a free market solution to that problem. I believe the market will correct those problems. People in a free market, people will always make bad economic decisions. So there will always be some altcoin out there. I don't think it will be as prevalent as it is today. I think we're seeing the heyday of altcoins from 4 years ago until today, and maybe perhaps for the next few years, we'll see the golden era of altcoins. Just like people will wake up to the Fed, I think people will wake up to altcoins. Enough people will have been scammed. FTX, I think FTX is a great example of, there were no FTX bailouts, right? There were bank bailouts in 2008, but when crypto exchanges went bust and people lost money, we just allowed it to happen. I think that was beautiful. We showed that you can let people have pain and suffer, and everybody like me who had a little bit of Bitcoin on Celsius and BlockFi, I ended up thankfully getting it back after a year, but for a long time, I just thought I wasn't going to get it back, right? And I didn't have all of my holdings on there. I had a small percentage, but it still stung, right? Especially as you see the price of Bitcoin go up and you only got a little bit of it back. But those were some of the most important lessons that I learned. The pain was a really good lesson. Now, when you get a bank bailout, you're also learning a lesson. You're learning that there are no consequences. It's like a terrible parent who doesn't allow their child to experience consequences. That child grows up to be a loser, right? My parents let me experience consequences. I remember the first time I got drunk in high school. My mom actually didn't even get me in trouble. She just told me she was disappointed. And she goes, "You're hungover. Guess what? Like, I'm not going to take care of you today. You're going to feel miserable today. And because you were an idiot." Like, and that was it. Like, the combination of my mom's not taking care of me when I don't feel well, and she told me she's disappointed, and she's letting me just sit in this misery. I never once got drunk again. In the rest of my life, I still drink occasionally. I don't ever get drunk anymore. And that was enough, because I just felt miserable. I had to deal with the pain. And I think that that's what happens when we allow bad actors to fail, and even good, innocent people, otherwise innocent people, to suffer because of it. That will happen in a free market, but that's the most healthy outcome.
And you think that everything can be built on top of Bitcoin? How does that work? As far as I know, in the crypto space, nothing's decentralized. It's so bizarre to think that, like, you know, when you hear people talk about proof of work, and we were kind of talking about this before, like, I thought just because something was proof of work, that means that, like, the miners, like that base layer was decentralized because there was no controlling it. But then you really, like, you realize that, you know, for something to change in the Bitcoin blockchain, it's like, what is it, like a proposal has to be sent out to the network, and there's a set date and time where, you know, they're either going to upgrade their equipment. How does that work on Bitcoin when, like, things like Taproot went live? Was that like how did everybody agree that, like, Taproot was going to be the way to go? And was there, like, something sent out to the network via nodes, and, like, you had to, like, you know, agree to update your node? Or how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a public awareness campaign. So there are things that miners can do to signal the network, right? Like, they can write messages into blocks and things like that. But I think for the most part, most of the communication was done by public open discourse, right? People that were node operators. And so just taking a step back, there's miners, there's people that are hashing for Bitcoin, and then there's node operators. So like if you host your own Bitcoin wallet and you host a node, that adds to the decentralization of the network, because what you're doing is on your computer. Yep, there we go, running our own node. That's beautiful. So that's right there. That's your one more switch that bad actors have to corrupt or turn off for Bitcoin to not exist. Now, we just showed that on camera, but there's millions and millions of people across the world who people don't know where they are. And so every one of those nodes is a copy of the rules that somebody would have to change. Now, if everybody that's operating a node decides that they're willing to change the rules, then that's fine. If anybody goes to, after the show, the Orange Pill app YouTube page, we don't put a lot of content out. It's been a long time actually since we've done it. But Knut's Van Home has a brilliant explanation of this. He talks about it in terms of chess. Excuse me. Sorry.
Yeah, Brian, he was sick this morning, and he was gonna reschedule the interview, and then he messaged me back, and he's like, "No, man," he's like, I'm not doing it. I'm coming on." I was like, "All right, bro, appreciate that big time." I really did, then. And so I appreciate you coming on. This is their YouTube channel. I think the subscribe button as well.
The meds officially wore off. But would you mind playing that for a second? If you go to I don't know if you can do that over.
No, it'll take me a second while you talk to rip it down, and I'll throw it in here. But what video is it?
If you go down a little bit, it goes to, it's like there's like a chessboard. Yeah. Bitcoin is chess, right there. That one right there. I think it's a couple minutes long. If it's too long, we can stop.
No, I'll rip it down. Just give me 2 seconds.
It's 2 minutes
down here while you talk to me and tell me about it, and I'll pull it.
Yeah. So the idea is chess is open source set of rules. And so if you want to change the rules of chess, if you and I decide that we want to play a game of chess where the king can move in any direction as many spaces as he wants, that's fine. You and I can play that game of chess, but nobody else is going to acknowledge it. So in order to change the decentralized rules of chess, you have to appeal to everybody, and everybody has to agree. So if we let Knut explain it, go ahead, man. Yeah.
Yep. Give me 1 second. We'll let it rip.
It's a beautiful conversation. I'd just like to point to another analogy I often use, and that's the rules around chess. If you know how to play chess, you have the network effect of the entire chess community around the globe. So you can play chess with any other chess player and enjoy that game to its fullest. But you can choose to fork chess and play some other type of chess, but that reduces the number of players you can play with significantly. So you can play chess cash on a board that's too large with too few pieces on it with a couple of friends, or you can play chess Ethereum, which changes the rules all the time. And you can play chess Nero, where no one knows where the pieces are or how many there are. And you can play all of these stupid other forks of chess, but it doesn't matter. And even if some big centralized chess association told every chess player in the world that pawns can move 3 steps now instead of 2 in the beginning, no one would play by those rules either, because you need the consensus, you need the players, you need the users to agree on this fixed set of rules. So this is what Bitcoin is, and chess has changed over the years. The fact that pawns move 2 steps, the first move, that they can do that, is because it was convenient and better for every chess player. So that emerged out of the existing rules, and everyone agreed that it was a good change. And the longest chain, proof of work chain, wins. So this is what Bitcoin is. It's just an agreement on a fixed set of rules.
Wow, that's so good.
That guy's so money. I love
wow,
dude.
That's really good. That's so true. How one funny thing about my node is I got this thing and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna set up I'm gonna open up a channel on the Lightning Network, and I did a little bit of research into it, and then I got it, and right after I got it, I was getting ready to move out of my other place, and I got it set up. I have no idea how to use it. I'm dying. If you know anybody that's an expert with the Lightning Network and nodes that would love to come on the show and do an interview and walk us through setting up a node and what you can do with it and all that stuff, I'm dying to really dive into that type of stuff.
Yeah, I'll set you up with BTC Sessions, man. He's an advisor on Orange Pill app. He has
Mhm.
a big YouTube channel like yours, where all he does is tutorials. I mean, that's his go-to thing. I think he's in El Salvador for the having party, so it'll
Yeah,
probably
everybody
be
is.
after he gets back from that.
You going down?
Um, no, I'm not going to be down there. I'm going to be in town. So yeah,
Okay.
it's family dynamics. I have 4 kids. My son's adopted, and so me traveling a lot doesn't do well for the adoptive separation anxiety. So a
Yeah.
lot of what I do is work in Southern California and things like that. But I will go out about 4 times a year. I'll travel for big events.
And how
But yeah, I'm missing out. I'm FOMOing pretty hard on the having
I
party.
know, me too. How's life in California treating you? How you feeling the crushing weight of our government yet there?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's crazy expensive. I have a small chain of wellness studios. We have 3 stores in Southern California. We do like red light therapy and infrared saunas and cold plunge and all that kind of stuff. And dude, our minimum wage goes up every year. Minimum wage here is $16 an hour. So no matter what, you have to at least pay even like underperforming employees $16 an hour. I think this month, fast food restaurants go to any fast food restaurant is a minimum wage of $20 an hour in California. I mean, they're just. I have a friend who owns a Chick-fil-A franchise, and it's just the policies, because people talk about taxes all the time. It's not just the taxes. The taxes are high, but there's so many other ways you get hit, and people are like, again, like we were talking about earlier, the things that are in plain sight. Why is everything getting so expensive in California? It's because if you want to go get a hamburger, that restaurant has to pay their employee $20 an hour, when federal minimum wage is whatever, $7 an hour or something like that. But I mean, that'd be a whole different discussion. I think minimum wage in general is just a stupid idea. The market should decide what people's wages are. But yeah, no, we're definitely feeling it now. We've had family members and friends that have moved out to Tennessee or to Texas or Arizona and things like that. I'm very connected in my church, very connected in the local community. The mayor of my city was my government and economics teacher when I was in high school. So like there's a certain amount of connection that I have to the city. And I feel like it's almost like a battlefield that I was called to, or like in Christianity, you talk about being a missionary in a foreign country, right? I have friends who are missionaries in like Indonesia, and that was a huge sacrifice for them to go to those areas. I feel like I'm a missionary in a foreign field, but it's the most comfortable mission field. I'm 45 minutes from the mountains. I can take my kids snowboarding. We go twice a week. We can go to the beach in 45 minutes from here. I get to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu all the time. My life is good. And yes, there's problems with where I live, but I'm okay with that because we're trying to make a change. My wife, she always says, she goes, "We're going to make California golden again. Like we should make shirts. Let's make California golden again." Because it used to be like the aspiration, the American dream was huge. And the height of the American dream was packing up and moving to California and going to the beach and living. But it's not that anymore. And what a shame that the world's 5th largest economy is basically a socialist
hellhole.
Hellhole Ponzi scheme. Like we talked about how people say Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme. Like we literally have a Ponzi scheme where the more people buy in, the more suckers there are. And so, anyways, we're definitely trying to do what we can to change this place.
Are you in an area where I'm watching some of these videos on Twitter and reporting on them over on LFA TV, and I see what looks like people going into like a nice neighborhood, like their house, what looked like I can only imagine what something like that would cost in California. And they go in, like they pull into their house, and it's a gated community. So they pull in, their gate to their driveway opens, the car pulls in, and then at like, I don't know, maybe like a minute later, you see these 2 burglars jump over the fence. Like they saw his car pull in, waited for him to get up to the door, and they come running in with him with guns. Are you ever feeling like your family's not safe? You got to carry a firearm on you in the area you live at, or are you out of that?
Yeah. I mean, so there's definitely that stuff going on in California. I live in a county. It's a Riverside County. We have a cool sheriff here. He makes it so easy to get your concealed carry permit that I think bad guys know that there's just always people walking around with firearms, concealed firearms here. The crime in our area is actually very low, and it's crazy that that's not studied more. Our sheriff, is consistently at odds with the governor, with Gavin Newsom. Like they're always in the press kind of blasting one another. And I think that, again, COVID opened my eyes to understanding the importance of localized government. Like I talked about, the local government, like my city government and my county government. I never knew how important those were. The shield that we got, my businesses stayed open during COVID because I knew, because our sheriff said, hey, guess what? I know the state's saying you guys cannot be open. We will not come and arrest you. We're just saying that, like whatever other consequences you guys get, that's on you. But if you're worried about getting ticketed, fined, or arrested because you're open, don't worry. The sheriff's department is not going to do that. The police department is not going to do that. So we stayed open, and that was awesome.
Cool, man.
In California, everything was shut down. So for the businesses that did stay open, business was booming because people wanted to go in and patronize those businesses and stuff. So yes, your local government absolutely matters. The ability to carry a firearm absolutely deters crime. There's lots of people in our county that deterred an incident because they drew a firearm. More often than not, the drawing of the firearm is enough to deter the crime. As soon as bad guys see that you have a firearm and that you're going to be a resistant target, they run. They try to get out of the way. So I'm a pretty strong two-way advocate, and I've become more so over the last few years.
Yeah, me too. So let's, I know I want to be respectful of your time. We're already a little bit past that hour mark, but what do you think people that pick up your buck and they decide to get into Bitcoin, and everybody like us, right? You just want to better the community. What do you think the best thing for people to do are, and I mean, it's like when you start buying Bitcoin, is it a great idea for every business that you walk into just to drop that? Hey, do you guys accept Bitcoin? Even if you don't want to pay with it, just can I pay with Bitcoin? Can I pay with Bitcoin? What is the best thing that everybody could do right here to kind of drive this adoption?
I think that's great. Honestly, if you can kind of like just subtly drop that to businesses, that's huge. Now, most businesses, it's so easy for them to start accepting Bitcoin. The problem is they think it's not. So there's this perception, and even individuals, they think it's hard to accept Bitcoin. The guy that I pay to do my kids' pickleball lessons, my kids are really into pickleball, and this guy, I know he buys Bitcoin. He's read my book, and he buys and holds Bitcoin. I asked him, hey, would you accept Bitcoin for the pickleball lessons? He goes, yeah, but I don't know like how to accept it. I've only bought it through Robinhood and that sort of thing. And so I don't want to undersell my book. I hope people go out and buy my book. But honestly, the easiest way to orange pill somebody is have them download something like Speed Wallet or some other. It can be a custodial Lightning wallet. I know that as Bitcoiners, we're supposed to be non-custodial. Again, we need to crawl, walk, run. A custodial Lightning wallet where somebody else hosts it for you is an okay starting point because it's very easy to use. You have them download something like Speed Wallet or Blue Wallet or any of those Lightning wallets, and then you just zap them 10,000 sats, 5,000 sats. You zap them just like a few thousand sats. And when they see that you transferred value instantly and basically for free, it changes their perspective. They always have heard things like, I heard that Bitcoin, you can't use Bitcoin for commerce because by the time you get your coffee at a coffee shop, your coffee is going to be cold by the time the transaction goes through. When they see Lightning payment happen, as soon as I send it and it pops up on their screen, I said, guess what? You and I just use mathematics to send value across the world. Like you could have been on the other side of the planet and this would have showed up just as fast. When they see that, they're like, wow, okay, we didn't have to ask permission for this. Like it's kind of life-changing in the way that when they see it. I always say, and I think I said this in the book, my mom never became what she would call an internet adopter, right? She just sent an email one day and then all of a sudden she was using the internet, but she would have never defined herself as an internet adopter. We need people who are using Bitcoin that wouldn't even define themselves as Bitcoiners. They just happen to send it for certain transactions and things like that. That's what I hope that we can get people to the point to. Now everybody's an internet user. You can't not use the internet. I think at some point, Bitcoin's also going to be the payment rails that maybe perhaps people don't even know that that's how they're sending their value.
And what are your favorite, sorry, I got to throw one more at you. What are your favorite, I hear you say Lightning wallets. What are your favorite applications, cold storage, and obviously custodial as well?
Yeah. So for, excuse me, for my Lightning node and my Bitcoin node, I use Umbrel. I like using Umbrel. There's a lot of good options for your nodes. for cold storage, I really like Cold Card. They're open source software. I used to use Ledger. Everybody, I think, in Bitcoin and crypto used the Ledger for a long time. Unfortunately, that we found out, a couple of years ago, that Ledger is closed source software. And so that means that there's just inherent problems with that. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've done anything bad, but you just don't know how to verify it, right? And in Bitcoin, it's don't trust, verify. And so with Cold Card, you can audit the software. People that are hardcore Bitcoiners have audited their open source software. So Cold Card is a really good way to go. And then, like I said, with Lightning payments, just Speed Wallet is a really good option.
Awesome. And as soon as your book is officially published, I know the pre-sales are going on right now. So if you guys get time, swing over to Amazon. It's only $9.99. You get to pre-order it. There is if you guys are just joining us, there's going to be 1 million sats hidden in this book. First one to find it gets it. If you can find that seed phrase there, you're going to be one of the first ones to get those Satoshis as well. And then if you guys are brand new to Bitcoin, check out Bitcoin Evangelism over on Amazon. And it's also on Audible, so you can get the audio book as well. Again, if you guys are just starting into Bitcoin, you guys had to choose one book. It's right up there with the Bitcoin Standard. I absolutely love it. I think it's actually easier and better to consume than the Bitcoin Standard, but I think you should read both as well. Brian, I just appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. And hopefully you'll come back on as soon as your new book launches.
Yeah, man, I would love to. Thank you. I had a good time. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather today, a little up in the clouds, but I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Man, thank you for sticking with us, and thank you for showing up, buddy. God bless you.
God bless you as well.
All right, folks, that is a wrap over here on the Ryan Matta Show. If you guys could do us a huge favor on the way out the door, smash that like button. If you'd like to support our sponsors, you can go to mypillow.com/Matta. You'll get 50 to 65% off everything store-wide. You also support Mike Lindell, and he's out there fighting to save this country. God bless you guys. Come join us over on LFA TV. We go live at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every day. We also do another show at 9 p.m. tonight, every night over here on the Ryan Matta Show. So thank you guys. God bless you.
Run.